I shook off like Kurt.
Dr. Brad.
Eat again.
I don't know if I was just telling Brad I don't have coffee this morning because I'm in the midst of cleaning my Keurig machine after making a catastrophe all over my kitchen with it. So I'm coffee free this morning. I'm not sure that's really good for the audience, but we'll find out.
We'll see how well you how it works for you. It's a longitudinal study.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Anyway, so Brad is talking about our dear friend James Lindsay's progress. So go ahead.
So I was watching these speeches, talks he gave to the Sovereign Nations group, and there's about 10 videos there on their website, and I think they're worth looking at because they're teasing apart the enemy's actions by understanding what they're doing, and it's related to Gnosticism and Hermeticism, which is the running thread, goes way back to antiquity. And so the premise is understanding that the enemy is operating in a Gnostic frame, which is why he was talking about Gnostics. We were discussing that the last time. And but he's like, the Gnostics claim special knowledge and insider knowledge and generate cults. And that's what we're contending with here. And it's like, that's right on the money.
Well, how's that different? Okay, yes. But how is that different from the entirety of prophet-based theology? It's no difference.
I would not argue.
Yeah.
I would not argue that point.
So and we think that
So the issue is he uses a philosophical understanding.
Right.
And he uses terminology that's philosophical. And that's I lose this word too frequently and I don't remember what it is, but it's the grammar that he uses in his discourse.
Right. So it's, again, theology, philosophy, right. And the order here is then it's empiricism, science, computation, right? I mean, it's just, and once you've got that, of course, we think in the grammars because we've been doing it a long time. So it's one of those things you see and then you can't unsee.
Right.
So you see, well, you're speaking in this grammar, and it and all that's all it means. And so, but the problem is with that is the benefit of it is he's going to reach more people. And of course, excuse me, I forgot the one point I was trying to make, which was that, arguably philosophy is the bridge between theology and science, right? I mean, that's at least theology and empiricism.
Right.
And so, I was working on a piece on this the other day. I haven't published anything about it. So, if it's natural if you start out with embodiment and then you move into the ability to think at all, remember and think and predict at all, and then you have the ability to look at the world and predict out into the world in time. You're going to take with you what your prediction mechanism is, your body. So everything starts with an analogy to what you most understand, which is your body, which is anthropomorphism, right?
Yeah.
And or body and behavior of others. So you're going to do that, and that's logical. So we have to go through this process of de-anthropomorphizing ourselves, which is really what science is, right? It's the process of moving from anthropomorphic world to mythology, to religion, to some sort of wisdom literature, to what we call philosophy, because realize everybody else doesn't do philosophy. They do an intermediate state between our philosophy, because it's more like what we do is more like logic, and then down into what we call logic, then call science, right? Science or empiricism, and then science, and then once you've solved science, you end up with computation. But this is just the process of de-anthropomorphization from one end to the other.
The removal of bias, yeah.
Well, that's a really great question. Is it a bias? Or is it just a frame? I think it's just a frame, right? It's the only frame you have. And a bias should be when the information is there and you're moving your decision one way or the other. Right? I mean, that's
subconsciously.
Right, subconsciously, when you don't subconsciously. And I'm like, well, I mean, is your frame a bias?
Oh.
Well, I guess so. I'm trying to be too disambiguating here, maybe.
Maybe.
But a frame is, in the sense you mean it, a frame is a bias, right?
It's a distorting lens through which you're viewing everything.
Right.
And so you're removing the anthropomorphic bias by you're removing the human out of the projection of the human out of the understanding that is being generated, or the comprehension,
right,
the paradigm you're using.
Taking us a couple of 10,000 years, 100,000 years.
It takes a minute. Shake it off, man. The animal.
And you wonder why it's so much easier to understand mythology and theology than it is to understand philosophy and empiricism and science, and certainly, computation. So, I mean, that's what we've generally said. It's like children's literature, young adult literature. I don't mean young adult. Like, there's no word for what are you like in your 20s. Right, there's no word for right, and then you have evidence, right, and then you have accumulated what?
I'm just thinking about what I liked in my 20s.
Oh God!
It probably smiled to my face though, Kurt. It's all good. Just remain calm. Sorry to interrupt you.
I was like it's so funny because you bring that up, because I know Brad and I have very similar minds and behavior. So it was what I had my fun in my teens, but I was like Mr. Career Man at 21. I mean, it was like,
good man.
Yeah, I was out there to make money and do that shit, and and so I was in a constant relationship. Just a singular. I was basically married. Right. And so I had my fun then, and then when I got divorced, I had my fun. But I didn't have those 20s like people have today. I was making money.
Good for you, brother. I got train wrecked. I was a psychological wreck. Got derailed on.
I have a hard time seeing that, but okay.
It was wicked, and it's like, okay, it costs a lot. That's okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Anyway, so let's go back to what you're saying is Lindsay is using the Gnostic method, and I would say
he's like, yeah, his argument goes like this, and I think that it's quite correct. Remember when I was talking about the wizards and the sorcerers?
Yes,
it's the same damn argument. It's like this: the sorcerers are the Gnostics, and they're casting spells to conjure demons, to control the demons through their superior knowledge of evil, and these are the Gnostics that Lindsay's talking about. And they're the ones generating all these subterfuges to control the massive population that they deem to be inferior.
Okay. You're correct. I'm not doing this, but I always have my view, right?
Of course.
That people have intentions, and those intentions solve a problem that's not intentional, right? In other words, they perceive a pressure in the world that they relieve through their intentions, right? So,
Right.
my view was, were they just like trying to undermine the church, or what were they trying
Oh,
to
right. So the basic premise goes like this: is like the premise goes to this word atonement, and it goes like this. So the issue is that every barrier to your will is to be undermined.
Every barrier to your will is to be undermined. Okay.
So there's just like any distinction that is not helpful to you is to be undermined by use of all the lying methods that we have discussed.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense.
But it's like I had this image. I want to share it with the audience, which is I want to get a couple of reclining leather chairs and a table in between that holds the popcorn and the whiskey while we watch Lindsay talk, and then we can have discussions about it. That's the image that I could see shot from behind, just
Yeah.
because it's kind of entertaining. But it's like the conversation that I'm watching right now or this lecture that he's given is really hitting on the money, because he's talking about who gets authority, what the different groups say about who gets authority, and it's worthy of consideration. So I think he's on track.
Great. No, I agree. And I agree that it's understandable. In other words, people can reach it, especially Americans. Now, he says he's sort of an atheist, right? But he's really
he's sounding less and less like one to me.
well. He's a what do you call Black Irish, whatever those guys are. He's a Southern.
Okay.
He's a Southern Celt, right? I mean, and I look at him compared to me and what's his name, Sargon, and I'm like, oh well, Sargon and I are the same, or we're both proper upper middle class Englishmen, right? And so he's coming out with his Southern sort of view, and I think that's exactly what you'd expect. But what I like about it is it's more accessible, and it's easier to get there in that tradition, whereas we have to use science to unpack all these traditions and find the first principle. And that's a more abstract problem. The question is, while you can communicate understanding the way they're doing it, can you actually correct it the way they're doing it? The answer is no.
Oh no, I agree, because there's an issue there, which is what is the situation, right? What is the situation? Which is, how bad is this, and how bad is it going to get? That's how I look at it. Which is when the situation is deemed to be sufficiently dire, then everyone will know it's time to act.
Right, correct.
And it's like, I think the situation is quite urgent, which is to say we are in a position where we are it's necessary to act, because we're courting disaster by antagonizing the Russians and the Chinese.
Or the Chinese and the Russians don't need antagonizing. They just sense our weakness and are moving in for the kill.
Well, I think it's the other way around, but it's okay. The neocons are thinking that the Russians are weak and they're moving in for the kill. And the Russians know it.
Of course. Well, we say it openly.
It's right rude.
Well, the difference is we're not against Russians or Chinese. We're against imperial governments. So, and the problem is,
wait, I don't agree with that contention. I say we are an imperial government.
we're not an imperial government. We're a federal government.
Well, I'd say we are. It's masquerading as a federal government.
I would say it's a domestically imperial government
Oh,
and a world federal government, and I would agree with that. And I would agree that, but I would also agree that this particular federal government does not want the world to have an imperial government. In fact, only the left does. And
they're
we're
in charge.
what?
They're in charge.
Who's in charge?
The left
Right. Well, they haven't got their world government yet.
and the neocons are. Well, they're running the United States, though. Yeah.
I don't see that. I saw the neocons die like I saw um, Ron Paul's libertarian. Ron Paul was the end of libertarianism,
Right.
and Bush was the end of neoconservatism. So what's happening today is simply post-war pragmatism. They're still running on this post-war strategy. That's all that's going on. And the question is, what they're trying to do is, because basically our method is to wait it out and conduct policing actions to wait it out instead of war. And so what's happened is that we've waited it out, but Russia wouldn't have mattered, but China decided that they wanted to be the next great power instead of join this federation of citizens. And of course, they want to do that because they want to preserve the wonderful gangster corruption of the Chinese world, just like the Russian elites want to preserve it. It doesn't mean the people want to preserve it. It means the Russian and Chinese and in Iran, the mullahs want to preserve it because they all are, I don't know, they use the word grifter. I don't know what that means. They're all corrupt. And so in order to maintain their power, they need to create an external enemy and assert power. So what happened is we expected the world to reach our post-war ideal, which was basically everybody was a global citizen, and then America could go home and be domestic again. And the problem is that it was really the breaker was China. Everybody else would have been fine, but China's big enough. And they took that we were too trusting, and they took enough advantage of us that they could break the post-war ambition to eliminate a world conflict by preventing empires and creating world free trade. So what's happened is, of course, that the Chinese and the Russians are trying to restore empires. The empires are the product of agrarianism. And we've got a world that, and empires are a product of agrarianism, and empires control trade and trade routes and colonies in order to get access to resources, so that they don't have to compete by merit in world free trade. So these countries don't want to compete by merit in free trade. Oil, in the case of oil, is a golden bucket for both Russia and for Persia, which wants or Iran. And for the case for China, they have an extant empire that is extremely fragile because they're huge importers. They need to import and export. And so they are too corrupt and too untrusting to participate in the federalism, as we can see, because they're still colonizing the Uyghurs, and they'll colonize somebody after that. Just like the Russians are trying to colonize Eastern Europe and the East and the borderline South. So these people are still engaging in agrarian imperialism because they are not uncorrupt enough, yet they're large enough that they can avoid the transition to federalism, which would decrease their power, and engage in free trade. So our ambition was fucking awesome. We did the right thing, and we raised everybody out of poverty just about doing it. We even raised China out of poverty doing it. But that does we didn't kill off the mullahs the Russian oligarchs and the Russian government, is just the government, and the Chinese government. We didn't finish the job, and we're sort of stuck with it. Interestingly enough, India is still struggling, but Indians are more like Christians in that they're peaceful people, so it's a little easier for them. So we basically, our great mission, which was a huge blood sacrifice for Americans to build this world so that we would have peace, but and then do it with policing actions. Well, my view is we just did a really bad job. We promoted democracy instead of explaining what we're doing, and which is we're raising everybody out of poverty by ending exclusive trade networks of empires, and instead creating free trade where everybody benefits by merit. Very white, very Anglo of us. And then, of course, the problem you and I see is that, well, that was all well and good, but this trifunctional optimism allowed decadence and what we call the liberals, right? Decadence, to undermine the family, which is the foundation of all societies, as the first principle. In other words, the family has to be the first, not the individual. And every other society is rejecting it. And so we created a policing action that was to produce a good, and had it ride on a negative hedonism. And so what they're doing is they're saying, you guys are bad imperialists and you're immoral. Well, we're great federalizers, and yeah, we're not immoral, but we're not moral enough to stop the immoral. And you are, or the other people are.
Who are the other people?
The rest of the world who's objecting to liberalism because it's decadence.
Okay, there's a couple things to unpack there, I think, which is the I would say it's decadence is one way to call it. I call it what was inspiring to me in that little arc you just generated was the Gnostic corrosion that is what we're suffering from, which is what the rest of the world is resisting. The Russians specifically are resisting the corrosion of this woke nonsense.
No, the Russians and the Muslims. That's their Muslims' primary objective.
Muslims aren't wrong about everything, Kurt.
No, it's like the French aren't wrong about everything.
I know. Well, that was very kind of you to throw that in. Put another feather in the French hat, please.
But they want to create the caliphate, right?
I can only imagine what wondrous things might occur if they were able to pull it off.
What you want is India. You want a federal civilization state, but you want one that doesn't have an 85 IQ, right? Average IQ, and you want one that is more developed. But as long as they don't fall back on religion too much, they'll get there. It might end up being more like Americans than European.
So I was watching Peter Zeihan, which I enjoy his works, although I don't entirely agree with him, much as I don't entirely agree with you on many of things, but most substantial issues of science, I certainly wouldn't argue.
I don't mind it when you're wrong, like you don't mind it when I'm wrong.
Right, you're free to be wrong until you're tired of it, right? Zion was talking about it though. It's like the I gotta get back on track again, but I can't remember what I was going to go on about.
You're watching Peter Zion. I was talking about India.
Right.
India becoming more like us than Europeans.
Yeah. It's the theme that I'm picking up from Lindsay as well is that the rule of law is broken in the West momentarily.
Yes, of course.
Well, we don't have our trifunctionalism working right at all.
No, because
And it's like, and
the
it's like,
government took caretaking away from the church, left the church without a primary purpose. Without its primary purpose, it has no way to be a communication vehicle for the morals that are Christianity. In other words, the purpose, the church had a purpose, a real purpose, a function.
mhm.
It's basically this social insurer. So we've produced all these charity functions in the federal government. They've taken the charity part away from the church, but the church needs a function, charity, in order to basically have a means of indoctrinating people into the message. And so they killed our church.
Right.
I mean, if you want to, I mean, this is what I say: if we just made Christianity our national religion and we put that back in the church, put caretaking back in the church, right, which would make it a local rather than federal.
Yes.
Basically, are interpersonal rather than procedural, which is how it worked under the volunteering, right? So charity is a function. We'd have probably been fine, but this whole this is one of the mistakes in our civilization of getting the separation of church and state wrong. It's not right. Is that the church has to be independent in the sense that it is its own entity, but it has to be trifunctionally independent, and that it's limited by the natural law to its own functions. But then it has a vehicle for providing continuing education. So we sort of broke that. So, like I said, you can't put in very small benevolent lies or errors over time have vast consequences, and that was one of them. Right? It's the same thing as I said, free speech. Free what speech? Free seditious, treasonous speech against the natural law. Free speech to promise false promises of different and potentially superior political order and economic orders. Those are all lies. So why are these frauds permissible? So, I mean, the two things I complain, there's three things I complain about most in the Constitution. It's the failure to specifically articulate the common law as empirical, the failure to specifically articulate concurrency, and the failure to specifically articulate transactionalism, which is these three things are necessary to preserving our way of life, our government, our civilization, really, and they're not stated in the fucking Constitution.
Wait, what's the first one?
Constitution is predicated on them. So, and then once you get that, you have two profound errors, which is the failure to identify what's truth and falsehood, and therefore letting free speech, and the separation of church and state without saying what their functions were. And so you got this, you put in just a few little errors. This is the problem. You put a few errors, and they're like interest. They compound over time.
The gap is the error, and the gap is the opportunity for the enemy to creep in. Now, what was you said? Concurrency, transactionalism, and what was the third element?
Commonality.
Okay.
Which basically means we have an empirical government.
Right.
Which says the government can't do anything that the people haven't agreed on.
Right.
Now you can agree on something indirectly through commonality. In other words, a lot of court cases can come through and say, well, I mean, this appears to need to be codified as legislation. In other words, because we've discovered empirically through trial and error, through the prosecution of cases, that this particular thing needs to be corrected. Right? And you could say through concurrency, we've all decided that we want this particular legislation, right? Commonality, concurrency, but it's just positive and negative ways of getting stuff. You find something out, discover a truth, and you choose a preference. And that shit isn't in the Constitution, nor is it that why, they're talking about interpreting the law. The law is transactional. That means that every word is a measurement at the time. So if back in the old days, we used pound sterling and now we use the dollar, if something's stated in pound sterling in the original things, we have to we have to change the measurement to dollars, right? And then say, and then maintain what the measurement was. But we don't get to say, well, that doesn't matter because we don't use pound sterling anymore. I mean, that you have to,
right.
So it's not so. Functionally, the law is an accounting system,
right.
and so this is where I get. I said, so you start putting a few errors in there like that, and that's people.
It's a navigational error.
Yeah,
because it is this social evolutionary navigation.
Yes. Just how smart those people were is hard for us to imagine. Now here I am doing this, myself and with you guys. Then finally I got you guys helping me. And they had 70 of the smartest guys in the fucking world working on this thing for 8 months or whatever it was, and they came up with a constitution. Well, I mean,
they did pretty well.
They did pretty damn good, it's pretty impressive. But they had the English tradition, they had the rule of law tradition.
You know what the problem was? Strap your seatbelt in, please. Yeah, and have a drink. Because it's like this. You know what the problem was with the Constitutional Convention originally? If they only had some women in there, they would have done it fucking right. Because they're like, we can't talk to these people. They're crazy. We have to limit their speech. Because they're just talking bullshit. That was just for humorous import.
Well, I mean, it goes into some of the things. Who's the woman that just admitted she was lying about Brett Kavanaugh?
Oh, really? I'm not familiar with this.
The problem is that magical thinking to women, it's not, they have a very hard time knowing the difference between what they want to be true and what is true. When their emotions are involved. And so what's happened is the visibility of this problem, now that it has visibility. In other words,
it rises up the iceberg surface.
And so you see it across all social, in other words, we've got enough examples of women having enough ability to speak that their magical thinking is something that we see not as when they're just women in the household and they're talking nonsense, we don't care,
we move away,
we can ignore it. But now we can't ignore it anymore. So and then I don't want to take this too far off topic, but I was listening to Jonathan Haidt yesterday, and and I was like, oh, he's just as fucking bad, He's just as fucking, if he goes into, he'll go there and he'll say, I worked on this problem. I understand that conservatives have something smart to say, right? I mean, he's the one who's done all this work on moral foundations. But in the end, if you ask him what to do about it, he picks all the feminine solutions, which are horrific. Right, which are they don't resolve a problem, they bury a problem, they sweep it under the rug. So it's like you can't win. I mean, it doesn't matter if they're women or men, if they're cognitively feminine, right? There's a small number of men who are cognitively feminine, just like there's a small number of women who are cognitively masculine. And so those things still happen, but this whole problem of women is just I'm like, they're rolling back I don't think any women have any idea what they're doing. They feel like they've obtained, something, or they're going to obtain something. What they've really done is they said, holy shit, tradition was right.
That's what it looks like. And I think that I see it increasing, it's a crescendo of signal coming from that community, which is females that are becoming increasingly aware of it, that this has been a bad trade and we're not happy and the men aren't. We've broken the deal with the men, and the men are not happy, and the women are not happy, and it's like it's not working, and this is a different.
Late Republican Rome.
Yes, that means what, pre-lapsarian.
Yeah. So I don't want to take you off of your Lindsay and Gnosticism.
No, I was going to circle back to that because Lindsay's he's right on the money, man. He's talking about who has the authority and how do different groups recognize the authority of who should be in authority in a governmental situation, and he correctly vocalizes it in a like a literary way.
Like who should be?
Well, it depends who's answering, right? So he calls the classical liberal is like nobody, and that will be you.
Yep.
That will be me. And then he says the proper religious person will be nobody really, right? And then the authoritarian type, the cult people are like, oh, of course it will be me because I have special knowledge. And
yes.
How dare you even ask? Why would you bother asking?
Of course.
And so he correctly identifies it. He identifies what is going on. He talks about our democracy, and he says it's not really a democracy. It's a republic in the guise of a democracy. And it's like the interesting thing is it's like he's hitting on all cylinders. And I think that I think that this understanding of the situation, which is what philosophically is occurring, which is Gnosticism, is a mystic in its function and is cult in its nature, is appropriate, and it's diametrically opposed to people that are interested in natural law and nature and nature's God as being independent of man.
Well, so
because the Gnostics will measure it. This is man is the measure of everything, and that is man's ruled by man, and it's tyrannical in its function.
Well, I mean, so let's psychologize it a bit. Let's deconstruct it.
Okay,
I'm using a left word there.
I was impressed.
I would say in our world we would say disambiguate it, but let's deconstruct it. And that just means that, what does it mean when I have private knowledge? We have excess confidence.
Yes, excess confidence. That's it.
Right? And then when I have special knowledge, that's magical thinking. And so what happens in our world is like, well, we're skeptical. And so we want an empirical result.
Yeah, show me.
Right. And they don't want an empirical result. They want an imaginary result. So that's why they engage in social construction to bring about an approximate of their magical thinking, to satisfy their fact that they're actually low trust. They don't trust, which of those we trust and they don't, right? And that's because we're trustworthy and they're not. And so you have neuroticism, low trust, magical thing, low trust. See, neuroticism, low trust, overconfidence, magical thinking, social construction.
Bad combination.
And so that's just female. Because the reason you do that is a resistance movement against nature itself or those who reflect nature. And why do you do that? To create demand from nature or those who reflect nature. So what are they? Female. So the deconstruction it's just feminine.
All right. Now, the interesting function of it is now I'm reading I still haven't finished it.
I don't think I did that one before.
No, that was a good one. is the Malleus Maleficarum. Okay, so written in the 1450s, the Hammer of the Witches, which is like talking about witchcraft and what are those guys in 1450 thinking in the 15th century, processing information about witches. And it's like, why they asked the question, why are we even going after the witches? How come not sorcerers, wizards? And he goes, there's not very many wizards, and they tend to organize the witches. And the witches are more susceptible to it.
That hurt. I didn't know that. That's something
It's in the book, man. It's
no,
in
I
the
mean,
book.
well, it's not in the book I would read, but the thing is, it's true, right? There's a small number of men who organize the women, who create the sedition.
Well, they set up the organized this incentive structures to make it so that it all works.
Yes.
Right. And it's like, so that Lindsay's talking about that too. He's like, this is like the issue is these Gnostics, they generate cults, and they're generally after your wife and your girlfriend and your money.
Yeah, of course.
What? But that's private property. You don't need private property in God's kingdom.
He's
But anyway, this is interesting. This is interesting because it's like this. The socialists will always say this. The communists and socialists will always say that wasn't real socialism when you point at the hundreds of millions of dead people, right?
Yeah.
And then they have hubris. They're like, oh, if I was in charge, then the great thing will happen because I can make it happen. And it's like they have no proof because there can be no proof because the claim is in the future. There's no empirical anything to point at that they will accept as evidence. Right. Because you don't understand. Because I have special knowledge.
Yep.
So it's
overconfidence, magical. I gotta write that one down because I probably won't.
I'm writing it down. So say it again, please. Overconfidence.
No, it's neuroticism.
Low trust.
Fear, vulnerability, whatever. Weakness, perception of weakness. Which is intolerable, right? That's why women are panic monsters, is because neurosis is intolerable. Then, so you neurosis. I can't remember how I did it. Neuroticism.
You said low trust. I wrote this down.
Overconfidence.
Yes.
Compensate. Magical thinking.
Yep. And social construction.
Social construction. And so that's how they're sequenced. I missed one in there. I'll go back and see the video. Social construction is basically the mass production of magical thinking, providing social reinforcement instead of environmental reinforcement. I realized, well, that's the same thing because it's so social. Well, I mean, I don't have a word for.
There's a non-correspondent part of it.
Right. I mean, that's what separates. That's why I say social construction. When we use that term in the discipline, it means that you're trying to lie about something. You're creating a lie. When it's not a lie, it's adaptation. Right. When it's a lie, it's social construction. So.
There you have it. So this is interesting. So resistance versus nature and those who reflect nature.
Yes. Why? Because nature isn't giving you what you want at the low cost. You want to.
So it's necessarily. So what?
Let me just finish. And women try to avoid paying cellular damage, whereas men pay cellular damage. The negative consequences of that is that the X chromosome has more volume on it, so it has more capacity for cellular correction. The Y chromosome has less capacity for cellular correction. Something along those lines, if I remember correctly. So men accumulate cellular damage. We take the risks. We live shorter times. Testosterone shortens your life too. So we get accumulated cellular damage. We're taking risks, so we are more willing to pay costs of nature, and women try to avoid costs of paying nature. And the equilibrium is produced by the female investment in children and the risk of childbearing, which is pretty significant, but then so is the male risk of death in warfare. So, which, I mean, now is nothing, but back in the day it was,
Oh yeah.
it was 20% or more of your population. That's why there's extra men. Because there don't end up being extra men.
And ends up needing to start with a little few extra.
Yeah. Nature's just physics. If you can't figure out the physics, then what, in other words, if you can't figure out how to express the human behavior in physics as an equilibrium between the sexes, then you don't understand, then you've got it wrong. It's, in other words, I think that's the hard part, is that the fundamental error in human thinkings, I've been trying to work on this one, is of course the anthropomorphic spectrum I talked about, which is one. The second thing is because males were so dominant, they're tending to think of ideal people instead of an ideal relationship between men and women.
Ah,
And the third one is the problem of mathiness, which is we start out with proof instead of survival, equilibrium and survival. And so you have these three profound first principle errors, so to speak, that at least to me represent most of the accumulated error in human thought in these three things. They're all derivations of this one. These three original causes, which is in those three causes are both natural human biases, because mathiness and justification and proof, these are the results of wayfinding and narrative construction. So it's just efficient communication necessary for serialization, because of serialization. And then you have the sex difference issue being dominant because males are so significant in political interactions, which are mostly offensive, defensive. And then you have the anthropomorphism, which we can't escape. So these three first principle errors tend to, I mean, everything I can think of, I do a lot of this, right? I do, what are the first principles underneath this? And I just sort of keep a sub track of what all these things are not reducible to. And eventually I see it. And it's really those are the three biggies.
interestingly, they're I would regard them as shorts in the circuitry. Okay, so what it allows you to do is to short the work necessary to come up with the right answer by falling back onto my bias in some fashion. And these are the three shorts that get you there.
Or you could say it's evolution's problem in the first place. Evolution has no idea where it's going. It doesn't have any predictive capacity. And it just works by trial and error. And so, we're just a reflection of that, and we have no idea what we're doing. So it's not an error so much as it's just the only way it can work. The problem is, in retrospect, we can learn and say, oh, we have this error of anthropomorphism. We have this error of monoism instead of sexual equilibrium. And we have this error of proof and justification rather than equilibrium. Falsification and survival. And so, we have these three errors, and almost every human thought is almost all human error. It's like when I say computation is the end of science, right? I mean, computation is the end of science. And at the end, if you finish science, you're going to end up with computation. And we're seeing that in AI now. I mean, the dumb one that I heard, that came out recently is they saved like 2 clock ticks worth of computer cycles for every vector multiplication they did in producing AIs. But the reason they found that is they told an AI to go work it, but the AI just did it by trial and error. Right.
Fast.
So they just did it fast. So because you can't math it, right? You can only construct computer. Yeah. Right. And so I say the end of end of everything is computation, right? It's computation. So we go from anthropomorphism all the way back to computation. So So working on that one yesterday. I'm like, so I'm right. I know I have to be right. I can't be wrong. I mean, it's not because I'm special. It's just because once you know the answer, you realize it can't be another way.
I just find it amusing.
Well, I mean, I know how it sounds, right? But it's like, well, it's like it can't be any other way.
said with all humility possible.
Well, yeah. It's like when I say there can only be 3 dimensions. There's nowhere to store the information necessary. I'm still having a problem. Figure out how I'm going to make that. How do I tell people? Well, because I've said there's there's 3 dimensions. Well, a dimension is an axis of measurement that represents a causality. But if the universe were to have more than 3 dimensions, they would deconstruct the previous dimensions to do it. It can't. There's no way to get there. And I try to explain that to people is like, I'm just, that's not going to happen. So, but I mean, it's one of those things. Like, I can't be wrong. It can't be otherwise. You can't get from A to B. It just can't happen. There's nowhere to store the information like there is when you're building up from 1 dimension, from 0 dimensions to 1 to 2 to 3. After that, it's like, okay, well, it's the same reason triangles exist. Triangles are work for what no matter what you do to them for the same fucking reason. But the minute you don't have a triangle, now all of a sudden you've got a problem because now something's got to cross something and cancel it out. Right. So I mean, it's just okay, well, it's just the same thing. And so all these things, it's like, and I realize I sound like a fucking crazy person to somebody who doesn't know what I'm talking about. But then there are a few people who's like, oh, wait a minute, I get what you're on about. And they get it. So let's do the best I can.
That's all you can do.
That's all I can do. I can put up with the slings and arrows of justifiable suspicion and ridicule. Because it is justifiable. Not that I know it's tedious, right? It's exasperating. It's not unjustifiable. I mean, I completely understand. If I didn't know what I know and somebody told me what I say, I would say you're fucking nuts. So I mean, I completely get it.
It's a reasonable suspicion. There's no question. Oh, life is good. So
it's like okay, so it's we're living through another period where those who don't understand history. And those who understand history are the victims of those who don't, right? Because that's what we're really going through right now, is we're just repeating an historical cycle, just like every historian said, by the way, there's a historical cycle, and by the way, we're doing it. They've been saying it for
what's funny is like this is history repeats itself. I've heard this number of places. It's like that. History repeats itself because human nature never changes.
Correct. That's true, but this is the secret, is that whenever you have a pyramid of people, right, that's sorted naturally through a natural error.
Right.
And so the class structure is basically an IQ structure. It's not entirely that. It's an IQ and conscientiousness and genetic load structure. But if you take a bunch of people and you lift them from this state to this state, what norms, traditions, and values do they have? The same fucking ones they had before, right? So when that happens, of course, you get social destruction because you haven't let people work up like we have, right, through into middle class ethics, which is at the point at which they have the common interest of all at heart, because that's what the middle class does. It's the trading class. So whenever you shift the people up, you're going to get this effect. Just like in Spain, whenever you shift the people down, right, they retain their previous not hardworking.
Right. Oh my.
So, which is fine. I mean, right. So but in any event, what you want to start out with is a military people, martial people, who implement rule of law, in other words, law, because they've developed trade. And with that trade, because that trade puts pressure, they develop a government. And then you get there. But what you don't ever want to do is go beyond the point where you have the government, the rule of law, and the militia with wealth substantive enough that you can switch from meritocracy to rent seeking. And that's what happens. It happens over and over again. The minute you get the rent seeking, you get the accumulated. All human organizations evolve to the point where they exhausted all surpluses. In other words, your company runs at the minimum profit necessary because the employees, the owners, right?
Yeah.
And then you can't adapt to shops because you have no free capital. So what you want to always do is say, you want to have free capital. Free capital available, necessary to deal with shocks of adaptation for short, medium, and long terms.
This is an interesting function in medicine. They talk about it as surplus capacity.
Correct.
And when you're young, you have great surplus capacity, but as you
Is that
age,
why we get erections like every 5 minutes?
that's it, because you're just they say young, dumb, and etc.
It's like that whole thing in like high school, and you're like, you have the wickedly hard erection, you can't, and like you didn't wear jeans today. That's the primary reason boys need to wear jeans, is because it gives it somewhere to be kept contained. Anyway.
Right. So that's and you're surrounded by all those just wonderfully voluptuous women. That's nice. And it's like, okay, so get back on track. And it's like this. Surplus capacity.
I like the gutter track.
I know. But the surplus capacity, as the human ages, the surplus capacity is used up. It's gone. So by the time you can't handle a shock when you're 80.
Of course, exactly. Yes.
And so it's the same as organizations. Human organizations are the same function, which is they utilize the opportunity, and that you exhaust the surplus capacity, and you're destined to get shocked.
Yeah, I think I brought this up 3 times now, but because I like the example so much. But was it Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger? I can't remember which one of them was talking about one of the companies they bought back in the day, and that they had started developed a piece of software that turned out to be pretty useful. And what happened was the original business essentially died off, but the profit they made from this additional software that they'd actually kept. They kept it. $30 million is the number I remember. And now they have a $30 million reserve to go after a business that you need $30 million to turn into $100 million, right? You need that money to get there. And so this is, what is it? A Star is Born,
Right.
The Star is Born theory. So you just need to reserve capital, but I'm going to tease the Russians. The Russians have generally had reserve capital called bodies. Actually, Russians. And so the way Russians win war is they just throw more bodies at it than the opposition can handle. And the Chinese to some degree did the same thing. They just throw more men in something than the opposition can handle. And the West, we have to throw more tactics at the end of more technology. So this thing deals with what's your reservable capital. Well, the reserve of capital in America turned out to be very interesting. It turned out to be the rigidity of the Constitution and the fundamentalism of our people, which is kind of weird because there's a really close relationship between the fundamentalism of Christians on the Bible and the Constitution. And so you have this really weird opportunity. We have guys like in my family, it'd be constitutional bias, with the religion is loyalty, and others that have the faith as their bias and the Constitution is loyalty, and others that are equally devoted to the Constitution, which is what we call American. God, guns, and country is equally devoted to military, law, and faith. And it's like, yeah, God's guns, and country. That's really what it takes to maintain your liberty. It's just those 3,
right?
So, which is really weird. It's another one of those things where you just don't realize there's truth in what sounds like a trite wisdom. It's just, humans are really wonderful. We're just really fascinating. The dumb ones are annoying as fuck, but otherwise it's really, really good. People are pretty amazing. And I love women, but they're fucking crazy.
Wait, no, I think that was poorly stated. I think it's I love women and they're crazy.
Yes, that's true. If they weren't crazy, how could we get their pants so easy? Oh, did I say that out
I don't recall.
loud?
Senator. My.
Try to. You gotta take. Yeah, you gotta talk about high-minded, deep thought. First
Right.
principles. But then you got to get down in there and you got to sedate yourself with a little man joy.
Right.
To reconnect between the anthropomorphic.
So I've been watching this. This is funny stuff. As I watch these guys they're in the gym, okay, and they got some woman sticking her ass in his face, and the guy just takes his t-shirt and puts it over his head and keeps going, because it's like, I'm not going to be on your video, and you calling me a freak or whatever.
Yes. They're starting to. I saw somebody. They're starting to say they're prohibiting videos in the gym for precisely that reason, because women are setting up men to be here. And I'm like, I've been in a situation before, like in around the house, I don't need my glasses, right? I'm talking to you, I don't need glasses. I really only need them to drive or if I'm going to look. So if I'm in the gym, my eyes might rest on some vague, blurry thing out there,
right,
that's moving. I have no idea, but I actually can't see it, right?
Yes.
And I'm just waiting for like some woman to come up and you're watching me. I'm like, dear, I can't. Where are you? Oh, I can't see you actually.
I know there's a video that was out. It was a guy who was actually blind.
Blind, yes, I saw that.
Just in the gym, and it's like for the audience, right? He got accused of being pervy or whatever, and the man has he has a paper that shows that he's blind. He's literally blind. He can't see. Yes. But he was still told not to make the people uncomfortable by looking at him. It's just like, okay, it's the world we live in. It's postmodern. You don't have a right to make people.
I belonged. I one point when after I recovered my health, I joined a proper gym, like the meathead gym, right? And which and they're right. It's the kind of place go the guys who want to be weightlifters go to. And so I hired a trainer and I did the whole thing. It was great, actually. The guy was fantastic. But it's like a too smelly an environment, for me. I just couldn't stand. So I like the big open.
Yeah.
So we switched to the big open gym. And the problem is they allow women these big open gyms, and so you get this fucking thing where it's like, I'm not sure better women should.
It's become more of a segregationist.
Yes.
Did you see this Scott Adams thing this week?
Oh yeah.
I'll go. We'll discuss it briefly because it's like such a stunning statement he made. Which
he's doing his job, which I was really Lindsay went after him like yesterday. I'm like, you don't understand. Well, James doesn't understand what he's doing. So so you understand what Scott Adams' thing is. His thing is his suggestion. He studied hypnotism, and he understands suggestion in the human mind. Yeah. So, and he says it all the time. So what he's doing is he's playing games with you. So he'll start out with one position to try to get you to another one, right? And I'm like, those of us who get it think it's fucking genius. But if you don't get it, you could pull out something he says and it makes no sense. But anyway, he was right. So go ahead and explain it.
He pointed at a survey that was done of African Americans that showed the question was, is it okay to be white? And 53% of respondents said it's okay to be white, leaving 47% who combined into two fields. It's not okay to be white, and I'm not sure. And he's like, I'm not sure I want to spend time be around people that are 50%, just about 47%, not sure it's okay for me to be white because I'm just white. And that's problematic, which I thought was an interesting point.
Well, I mean, I riffed off it, so I wrote a couple of things about this. Of course, they got you. It's like this is another thing. I wrote about this the what's his name, Prince Harry, and being a scumbag, and that was like really popular. And I wrote about this race thing, and that was really popular. And it's like I write something extraordinarily profound, like the reason for we did it earlier in this conversation. The reason for world conflict is the difference between what America says and what we're actually trying to accomplish, and letting the left ride on it, right? And so you're sort of say something really profound, and it gets like 500 views, right? And it's like, why try to say anything meaningful, right? It's because it's so the people who know us, right, the people who follow, actually learn something. But anyway, so yeah, so he said this thing, and I was like, well, it's actually the right message to send, which is, why do I want to help you if you hate me? All right, I don't have to hate you. This is an important point. I don't have to hate you, but I don't want to be around you if you hate me.
It seems reasonable,
right? I'm not here to be your whipping boy, so to speak.
Oh my!
I saw that coming, huh?
I didn't see it coming. That was out of the blue, brother.
Yeah,
that was well played. Oh my Lord!
well, it's like the multicultural thing was never true. It was never meant to be true. It's a social construction for the purpose of undermining. And we know who did it, because they don't want to integrate. So we brought them in post-war. They're the first people who didn't want to integrate, and they undermined our past effort to successfully integrate. And so you get the continuous undermining. They began in the beginning of the 50s, but it took great place in the 60s, and they've just been undermining ever since. So you're going to get to the point where it's taken from 1950 to now, which is the 20s or so,
70 years.
70 years to undermine our civilization from within. And the reason is that women believe it.
That's why you go after the witches.
It's exactly why I brought it up. Tie it back.
I know we tied it back to an ancient book, man.
All those books written in the 1400s, all that stuff. Yeah, so you understand, 1500s. They've got the fucking printing press the first time, and they're trying to figure out how to make money. So you get stuff like who's the guy that wrote all the forecasts of the future?
Oh, Nostradamus.
You get that. It's just, and as you get the had the same thing in the Victorian era. Is we had a lot more money, and so there's all this increase in spiritualism, because we don't think of it this way, but the discovery of electromagnetism allowed for a lot more tricks, and so this led to all this spiritualism,
Mesmer, and all that, this craziness.
And who paid for that? Women.
That's right. That's right. So the Malleus Maleficarum talks about it. They're like, women are more susceptible to the encroachment of spirits. They're more open and accepting of. So that's the issue here.
Oh, it's
which is it has to do with suggestion. Is all it is they're more sensitive to suggestion. Men are hard-headed and busy. They're too busy taking care of business.
I'll tie it back to John Haidt yesterday again, as it, he's talking. I'm like, John, the difference between you and us is you have a higher incentive to understand, believe, and agree with those around you than we do. It's just that you call it agreeableness, but it's actually susceptibility, and we just have less susceptibility. So you
it's like a demand for social acceptability. You have a higher demand for social acceptability than we do.
Right. And why do they have that? Because they have a higher fear of conflict and confrontation. And we have a lower fear of conflict and confrontation. And so we have a lower possibility of suggestion and manipulation for the purpose of belonging. This is just fucking herd animal behavior. It doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, there's no meaning to it, but they take it as good and moral because it feels good and moral to them.
That's because it's concentric with their biases.
Right. And just male and female.
And so the attribution of good is a justification of the stance.
Yes. I jump off a bridge today. I have this beautiful bridge down here. Now they put up a high fence off it because so many people have been jumping off it.
Oh no.
Yeah, my family's made a lot of money from people jumping off that bridge.
Oh
They
my.
end up down in Moodus. The bodies, they end up down in Moodus. You don't want, I gotta tell you, from personal experience, one thing you do not want to do is pull a body out of the water. It's really gross. It's a really gross thing, especially because they could come apart. I was just seeing if I can get a reaction out of you.
Yeah, it's just one of those. I got nothing good to say about. There's a reason the church sets canon against self-murder.
Yes.
It's not because of anything, but you're going to leave a mess and everybody else has to clean it up, and that's just beyond rude.
I like the church's value of human life is pretty much unmatched, and I do find that pretty useful. It's got an anti-pragmatic absolutist position, which doesn't leave any room for waffling.
Right?
Which is quite a justification. They got a lot of things right. It's the whole churchy bit that's the problem.
I don't know what that means.
Fundamentalism.
Churchy bit. What's the churchy bit?
The tendency of all organizations to turn corrupt.
Yes.
I'm not interrupting Brad because Brad's captured.
Trying to get the word again. I'm trying to capture it on my little piece of paper here.
All right. So down back to the Lindsay guys and the Gnosticism and
yes, because you were having trouble with that one before, the Gnosticism.
Well, I didn't understand it, so I had to go read up on it. And now I understand it. And
what's your assessment?
Well, from my perspective, as trying to preserve, so I'm gonna don't yeah.
No, I understand. I'm not writing this down.
No, it's from my perspective of, I look at it as Jesus came up with a message that was a traditional religious position. It's probably influenced by Buddhism, and they try to institutionalize it, and I saw them as trying to repersonalize it. And so I saw a resistance movement against the politicization of the religion. So in that sense, when I read something the Gnostics say, I interpret it through that lens. But if you flip it around and you say, I want to make it an educational, and in other words, rather than a voluntary religion, I make it a political involuntary religion where people are brought in that I can govern people with. You would see Gnosticism as bad. It's the same reason you would see Protestantism as bad as a Catholic, and you would see Protestantism as good as a Protestant or as a German. So you would see those two things for the same reason, is that organizations tend to be corrupt, and what we want is individual spirituals. That's more like the Greeks, which is the Greeks were trying to make it, and the Buddhists trying to make you individually spiritual, not make it a political system. So once the Romans, or especially Romans, there's sorts of things start turning into a political model. They're like, well, this is becoming formalized. This is turning into a way of manipulating and managing people instead of demanding the person be spiritual. So it's, and you got to go back to the old tradition of shamans. Is what they were doing is they're trying to protect the ability to be a shaman, to be a local leader of a group, a local devotee to the religion, instead of having this thing turned into be more Roman-like, which is an institution. I don't think I did a good enough job there, but in other words, I understand both sides of the argument, which is what you guys get on me for all the time. I'm waiting. I'm looking for you to shoot a hole in me.
Like this, it's like the interesting function of it is it comes down to is the claim of authoritative intermediation between reality and the individual subject in mind. And that's the objectival part.
I don't know if I can do that without an example.
It's like this. It's like the church said, don't read the Bible. That's not for you. And then it's like, well, the Protestants are like, no, we'll read the Bible and we'll interpret the Bible.
Right.
And we're not depending on you to tell us what it says without us reading it and corroborating that we believe that or not. Right? Yep. So it's like I don't have faith in man's institution, but I have faith in my ability to discern.
Yes. So how does
so it's a so the
in other words, because I took the way I was interpreting you saying it was that these Gnostics were like our people today, and I'm like, well, I mean like these people who have special knowledge or whatever today, but the difference is they weren't the ones politically organizing, whereas the people today are the ones politically organizing. That's what bothers me, I think.
Oh, it's like, no, it's like this inevitability. So it's a sign of senescence of the organization that they get captured by these people who claim special authority without actually they're credentialed. Mm-hmm. They have gamed the system sufficiently in mass, and they understand who to promote and who to step on. They're selective, selective tolerance, right? Isn't that the right term by Marcuse?
Yeah, it's repressive tolerance.
Repressive tolerance. Thank you. And it's like, so it's like that's the issue here, because it's like they use secret code language, and this Lindsay was talking about it. He's talking about the word salad being generated by the Vice President Harris, and it's like she says, we need to be together, and together we're going to together and together, and she's like using this together thing 70 times. He goes, she's not trying to say anything except don't step on me, I'm one of the team.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's interesting.
Wow. You got a guy who can't walk upstairs and that fucking as president, it's an essay on the reality, which is that it's the cabinet and the administration who run the government, right? And it's the administration and the deep state that run the government.
It's clearly a shadow play in Plato's cave. And what's amazing is how many people buy it. That's what's stunning to me. It's like, okay.
Well, this is why been the general argument is they created. We have our monarchy. It's just constantly rotating monarchs, and that the difference is the monarchy and the president basically can control the military externally, but internally he cannot do almost nothing. So so the weak spot is that Congress is supposed to do everything, but it doesn't have a prime minister. And so what happens is you have to make these things agree, which is fine, because you would have to make the parliaments, the House of Lords and the monarchy agree. But that's different from having people who have different, who have to all agree, but all have different powers. So my complaint is that there's the presidency, the monarchy is necessary, but that the parliamentary system where you have a prime minister is superior, simply because domestic issues can be handled by the domestic and the international issues by the monarchy. In other words, you have a difference between government and state, which is important, profoundly important difference. I would prefer, of course, that it was the monarchy and a cabinet. The prime minister was the representative of the Congress to the cabinet. But that's what I prefer, and the cabinet ran. And, you know, you had this merger between the top two layers. That would be fantastic. But we have this. They you know, as I said, Washington fucked up. He should have taken the goddamn monarchy when they offered it to him. Well said. If that had happened, that would have been. And one of the reasons we love him is because he didn't.
Yes.
Right, because it takes a man of profound character to do a thing like that. And he
That's
was
the kind of guy you want as your king.
It's like, well, the reason you don't want it, exactly why we want you to have it, right?
Sorry, Mr. President, it's not an option.
And it's not because anything other than it just turns out that you want the monarchy and the military, the government and the treasury. You want these things. It's just what you want. This is just division of labor. And, you know, so our presidents tend to matter because of their foreign policy more than their domestic ability, right?
Well, which is fitting for the way the federal government was intentionally designed.
Yeah. Yes. Which is important because thank you for bringing that up, because it wasn't supposed to be a strong federal government, right? It was supposed to be basically a defense organization.
Should be the only subjects that are of interest to the federal government internally, domestically, should be only states.
Right.
They should be the only ones talking to the federal government. There should be no interaction between the civilians and the the federal government, excuse me.
I don't know if that's.
The federal government should have no interest in any particular person.
Well, the idea was that you couldn't get the governors to go to be in the Senate. So the governors appointed a senator, right? Yeah. And then so you had the states, right? Which was X number. And then you had the population. And so you could get both measures. The population in the House and the states this way. And so you'd have a competition between mass democracy and local and differences. So it was for that reason it's great. The sense that the federal government can produce social policy is the problem. In other words, they should have no say.
They should have no say.
Because that's what needs to be. That's what people want. They want local manners, ethics, morals, traditions, values, right?
Right.
And they want universal free trade and defense and assurance.
That's right.
Unless you're a liberal, which was you got to have everybody has the same thing because I believe I'm right. If you're a liberal.
No, I don't believe it. I know it.
The United States is not a country. It is a federation of states. Europe is not a country. It is a federation of states. They're just trying to make it an empire instead of a federation. That happened because of the Civil War. And as I argue, which I'll get in trouble for always, the Civil War was they were right to secede because that isn't a matter for the federal government to decide. And anyway, slavery would have disappeared in 30 years anyway because it's economically inviable. It's like the civil rights movement did more harm than good. Black community was already building an upper black caste, an upper middle class, a financial system. They were highly Christianized and they had the strong families. The liberals had to help them.
But it's like that. It's like so this book falls into E. Michael Jones's book, Slaughter of the Cities, in which he documents the modern liberal utilization of the civil rights movement to gain political control from the state level to the federal level in the 50s.
Yes.
And that was the purpose of it. So from their perspective, it was entirely successful.
Of course. Which is what John Haidt said again yesterday. Is well, you know, the thing we don't attribute to is how strategically organized this movement was. I mean, it's part of communists are organizers, right? That's what they do, right? So this organized, whereas our point is sovereigntarians, which is you don't organize, right? There's no authority. They don't organize. You organically do by voluntary cooperation. And so this is another example of this, the conservative sovereigntarianism, where you prevent authority, and the left's collectivism, which they demand, they try to create authority. And you know, they well, you guys are fascists. I mean, we want authority to prevent, and you want authority to do. Prevent what and do what? Well, you think what you're doing is good, but it's actually criminal, and we're trying to prevent you. It's not an opinion. If you say we want to create a social safety net because we're wealthy enough to do with it, that's great. But how do you do it? You don't do it by collectivism, which is redistribution. You do it by savings, and you just borrow the first generation, right, to do it, and you pay it off over time.
I have a question for you. This is a legal question, because it goes to this. See, I'm not going to use this conspiracy word. I'm going to use a different C word, which is collusion. Now that is not as hard to prove. I think that we have collusion occurring amongst various groups that can be demonstrated in a court.
I think you're probably right. We should do collusion, sedition, treason. It should be that hierarchy. Undermining, collusion, sedition, treason should be the hierarchy. I don't think I've got collusion. I don't think I've put collusion in the law. I have sedition and treason in there.
Well, that's good.
So collusion is, you know, it's conspiracy, collusion. Technically, conspiracy has to be secret, and collusion it doesn't.
So Lindsay was funny. He was talking about conservatives. He goes, conservatives aren't. They're just a competing form of liberalism in the way that there's competing form of Gnosticism, is what he said. They know they're the right ones to be in charge, and they want to be in charge. Well, I thought that was kind of an interesting function, because it's like the people are left, and it's like from our perspective, the sovereign types are like, we got better things to do, and I don't want to pay too much attention. Which one do I trust? And it's like, okay, I trust them more than them. And it's like, well, they're still both not too trustworthy because they want the power.
Conservatives evolve a society by incremental suppression of the bad that's discovered, and they leave it to the people to produce goods. Progressives are afraid of conflict, so they they try to produce goods. So that's masculine, feminine. That's it. There's nothing more to it. They're afraid of conflict. They're herd people.
Yeah, but so if you look at these people that are like neoconservatives, they are certainly progressive in their function.
Neoconservatism, libertarianism, communism, same thing. Communism for the lower class, libertarianism for the middle class, neoconservative for the upper classes. What is neoconservatives trying to accomplish? They're just Trotskyites, right? That's where neoconservatism comes from the communists, Trotskyists, to finding out that this Stalin thing isn't a very good idea.
Right.
So we have conservative Stalinism.
That was just wrong.
I'm just sorry.
It hurt, kind of put a dent inside my head somewhere that might not ever be able to be worked out.
Well, I mean, Stalin, Leninist, sorry. So, like Hillary Clinton's a Leninist. She studied Lenin. She's a Leninist.
Yes.
Right? Leninists believe they have special knowledge, special privilege, special ability. They have overconfidence in what they're going to do. And so she's a Leninist, and it's not complicated. I see most conservatives in the Leninist. Stalin's like the negative, and Lenin is like the try to be positive. But these are both belief that they have special knowledge that humans can behave as other than they do, but they don't. But that's okay because they have an instinct that's simply false because they're either it's because the feminine mind. They're afraid of conflict, and so they have to hyper react to conflict. They don't manage conflict. They're low trust because they're not trustworthy themselves. And they're not trustworthy because they're impulsive and emotional. There's nothing complicated here.
So we got to put that impulsivity in that series we made before.
Right. If you're neurotic and impulsive, you're going to be
low trust, overconfident. Wow, magical thinking. It's a bad combination to put in charge of anything that has a sharp edge on it. It's like, children, don't run with the scissors, please.
Well, it's like if you're constantly afraid, this is just the female method. If you're constantly somewhat afraid, that's why you want to have a woman have a strong dad. If you're constantly afraid, then you will when you express your fear. In other words, when you get a chance to release your fear, your own will do it. Your own will do it. I mean, it's just not.
So we need to name it. The series needs a name, right? There's a series of it's a propensity, a feminine cognitive propensity, right?
Masculine's the masculine, it's the human. It's like I say, you have to, whenever you want to test a series by behavioral hierarchy, you have to figure out how both sexes do it. And once you figure out how both sexes do it, what you realize is just a mirror image of
right,
fear of conflict and tolerance for conflict. Consumption versus capitalization, empathizing versus systematizing, which is just a time function. You realize that you can just put those two series together, and then you have the differences, and that's what all differences emerge from. So my problem with all this theology, mythology, theology, philosophy,
yes,
empiricism, and science, until we get down to computation, which is what I do. When you're in that hierarchy, you can invent all sorts of stories that take some subset of properties and create a narrative from it instead of a consistent narrative. So what do we want when we have a standard of measure? We want a consistent narrative across all scales so that you can say, I'm making consistent measurements and comparisons. If you can't make consistent measures and comparisons, what you do is you make different narratives that compete with each other. And it's just a game of pickup sticks of who can lie best. Tell the best story. That's why you got to have.
That was rude. This is going to be rude. It's like folk wisdom, right?
Right. It just sounds better, but it's all folk wisdom.
It's not. This is like this. It's like that. I heard somebody say this to me just recently, talking about 97% of scientists agree. I said, yeah, and the 3% are the ones that are worth listening to.
Yes.
The 97% are not worth listening to because they're not trustworthy. They're just freaking sheep, and this is not a plebiscite.
The problem, again, I said the thing is, in economics we know this, in physics they know this, but you don't see it outside of economics and physics. The economists say, well, just because I know this doesn't mean I know anything about that, because the circumstances that the principles that affect that particular system are nothing to do with the principles that affect this system. Well, it's the same thing in physics. It's like they'll tell you, I'm a gravitational physicist, or I'm a quantum background physicist, or whatever. And they're like, well, that guy says something, he knows more about it than I do, because the amount of knowledge you have to understand this particularly complex fucking thing turns out to be pretty challenging. But you get these people in the behavioral sciences, especially in political, anything behavioral. Technically, economics is behavioral science, but we'll just separate the real scientists from the pseudoscientists or the behavioral scientists. Yeah, sorry, I just had to say that, and say that there's. I mean, we talk about this all the time, but it's just most of it's nonsense.
Yeah, I like that. That was that was like a cherry on top, extra barb just thrown in for sprinkles.
Same thing with mathematicians and computationalists. It's not as bad because it's pretty hard to make a mistake. In other words, it's harder to be erroneous with math versus computation. But you talk to mathematicians and they talk about they rapidly go to what we call mathematical realism, which is talking about math as if it's existential rather than it's a language for the description of constant relations. And then you talk to computationalists, and these are confusing terms, but mathematical naturalism, which is it's all functionally operational, right? I mean, it's physical. It's not verbal, it's physical. And so you have this problem between mathematicians, and you have some agreement between mathematicians and computationalists, but then at some point they diverge, right? The person who understands this best is, I'm not sure I might describe it best, but who understands it best is of course Wolfram. This is his nightmare.
What's his nightmare?
Well, he's trying to make that bridge, and he uses the mathematical frame, despite the fact that he's doing it all. There probably needs he needs the linguistic frame. He needs the grammars to talk about what he's doing.
So he's kind of hamstrung by mathematical limitations.
It's that he's trying to express everything from the viewpoint of everything in computation from the grammar of mathematics, without looking at above and saying, okay, this language, because basically makes his software can allow you to make languages, right?
Right.
But if he'd had the grammars, I think he'd talk about it a little more clearly. But when you hear him talk, he starts and stops a lot because it's hard for him to find words. And I just think that's because would need to understand the grammars, and then he could probably come up a little better. In other words, this problem is.
Wait! You know what you just said?
What?
You just said that he needs a copy of your book.
Yeah, well, the world needs a copy of my book.
I'm agreeing. I had to put that plug in just for the audience. Like, everybody lean on Kurt just a little bit.
I don't need any leading. I had a very bad day yesterday. I don't need any leading on.
Sorry, brother.
That's okay.
We're doing all right. Well, shoot. So the interesting function is the operation of our enemy is by emotional contagion. It's emotional manipulations, and
goes back to Scott Adams and his emphasis on suggestion. But yes, it's all suggestion, right?
Yes. That's
Emotional,
what my uncle said. It's all hypnosis, Brad.
right. So if you can bypass the way you loading, framing, fictions, fictionalizing, it's always a way to circumvent reason by using suggestion that causes emotional association. It forces encourages you to agree or disagree.
Right.
Based not on judgment, but on intuition.
Mm.
Which is, it's that's useful when the people lack the ability to reason. They're down there in the 80 IQ range. Actually,
Right.
down there anything under 100, but it's not useful up in the upper ranges. That's why we have the spectrum of grammars we do, the forms we do, is because reasoning is costly. It's quite costly, whereas intuiting is cheap. System 1 and system 2, that stuff.
Right.
Reason's expensive. The brain's freaking expensive.
That's right.
Some people's brains must not be more expensive than others. Is that true? Anyway, the more costly. You could have an internal cost or an external. Oh my God, I didn't even need to go there. That was horrible. You can either pay the price of being intelligent and
Right.
internalizing that cost, or you can externalize that cost by being stupid and relying on others. I didn't need to go there. That was just ruining. That's going to ruin my day. That's all I'm going to see for the next week is you're externalizing your neurological cost on others. Okay? Your neurological error rate is being externalized on others.
Oh my.
Fucking exasperating. Anyway, we're supposed to be complimenting. We're supposed to be having this discussion. We're complimenting Mr. Lindsay on his progress toward the correct answer and his success at communicating that answer. That's what we're trying to do here.
That's excellent work. It's very impressive. And like I say, what I'd like to talk about, listen to what he's saying in one of these, if you would be so kind sometime.
Well, I guess we can do that tomorrow if you want.
Comment upon it. That would be all right. That'd be all right. And it's like I'm very impressed by this group and it's the Sovereign. Hang on. I'll give you the name of their organization. Sovereign Nations, I think. Yeah, is their handle. They have a YouTube channel that has their videos in it that are interesting. And it's like a Christian reaction to this woke thing.
Sovereign Nations YouTube.
Yep. They have a stylized lion's head as their logo.
I hope this doesn't start out with a lot of noise.
Oh, it does. It has glorious music.
Oh God.
Pretty much.
Okay. Well, I won't be able to tolerate this.
Oh, you will. You will. I guarantee it. Because what it do is it devolves into it's just a single lecture.
Do we need a cross for salvation? I'll hang myself. I gotta watch that.
Look up the
So you have some from Lindsay on here.
Yeah, so look up are you in the videos?
Yeah.
So the one I'm listening to right now, which I was kind of surprised how good it is. It's like it's called the Gnostic Parasite.
Yeah, the race marks. No, they got some good stuff in here.
Yeah, they're good. So it's like that, but it's just a lecture from one person each time after the glorious music.
Okay, that looks good. I can do that.
We don't have to watch. It's like this. I wonder about this fair use function. I don't want to listen to the whole thing. It seems like it's not fair use. You know what I'm saying? And I just want to run that by you to consider.
First, somebody would have to object.
And then it could be taken down.
And it can be taken down. The second thing is, if you're commenting on something that seems to be legit, so.
Okay. We're in this weird place in this digital age, which is what are the rules? It's like there's no custom, right?
Yep.
It's okay.
Well, my view is that we need to remove the libertarians are right, half right, and that if it can be Creative Commons, it is Creative Commons. In other words, if you're not depriving someone from money,
Right.
which is pretty hard. In other words, you can share it. Anything that can be shared, it can be shared. Right? If you go to a concert and you record it, that's different.
Yeah.
But if it's published in a digital form, then it's by definition Creative Commons. That's my view of how this should work. Because there's no as much as people would hate me to say this, there's no reason you have or any particular right
to the image of the
to prevent the spread of information.
Right.
If you were to say, I'm an artist and I created this art piece, and other people want to use it and copy it, whatever, that's great. But the minute you try to make money with it, now you've taken it out of Creative Commons.
Oh, right.
Commercial realm, and now you've got to pay for it. Right, so
that makes sense.
So I lost you. I got to find you again.
Hi, Kurt.
Wave.
So that'll help you.
There we go. Too many windows.
No.
So Brandon, I tease him all the time, but Brandon has like, I don't know how many. He has this computer where he had to order special to have all the monitors he has, and I can't fit that in here. I mean, it would take over my. But
like
I just have the two.
Looks like the bridge of the Enterprise in there, man.
But it's awesome, right? I mean, I remember back when you could first get two monitors, right? I mean, I was like, I gotta have two monitors because it's really hard to reference something, right? And back in the day, when they people don't remember this, but there used to be this, you had a screen, right? You had to leave something to go back to get something else. So there's a thing called desk view, which was the first thing that allowed you to have two programs running. And so you just alt tab or command tab, whatever it was between programs. And that was like such an innovation because you could have like documentation open in one window or an example or something else and come back. Well, today, I mean, most people work with two monitors. Some guys work with three. I like one for messaging, working, and reference. But I find that the more windows you have open, the less chance you have of concentrating.
I think
that's the more screens, excuse me.
Yeah.
So it depends on what job you're doing. Like you see these guys in server rooms back in the day, not today because it's all different today, but back in the day it was like this just wall of fucking screens. I feel like one of those COBOL guys when I was a kid, right? When I was sort of first starting out, you'd have all these green screen COBOL guys. Yeah. They were fat and they're overweight and they were nerdy. They were unkempt. And now programmers aren't always so overweight and nerdy and unkempt anymore. They're still a little nerdy sometimes. But, it was a very different social world back then. Anyway, I remember saying that when I can't remember what book it is, but I interviewed the author. And he said that my argument was that IT, which is not programming, but IT would become an ass crack profession. And it did.
Oh my, what a strange reference.
Well, you plumber, you bend over, you can see the butt. It's going to turn into that because there's no way. And this author was saying, well, we used to have chief electricity officers. We don't have that anymore. It's a fucking janitorial function, right? I mean, not janitorial, operations function. Same thing with IT. now we're getting into the point where we've got so far with neural networks that's like becoming a normal skill that people have. Training a neural network is like it's slightly more horrible than trying to train a bunch of dogs with attention deficit disorder. It's just like just fucking nightmare. Anyway, we've reached up to our 2-hour limit here. Have we done Mr. Lindsay the service he deserves?
I hope so. And it's like that. There's certainly, I look forward to watching that and hearing what you have to say about it.
Why don't you pick one for tomorrow and we'll do that. All right.
Okay. Sounds
All right,
good.
so you didn't do your thing.
I know. I don't know what episode this is anymore.
Well, let's just get
episode 2302, maybe 12. Hang on. I have it in this book. 13, 7, 8, 9, 9. 9 or 10, somewhere in that range.
Somewhere in there. All right. So Saturday, February 25th, 2023. Like, subscribe, bell, comment, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kurt.